Hi, greetings philosophy class, and welcome to week 3 of Introduction to Philosophy. This is Michael Rogers, your professor for the course. I apologize that you don't have a student presentation this week, but hopefully you'll enjoy what I've put together for us. I should also confess that I might be checking the score in the Cardinals-Astros game as I narrate this presentation. Along with Socrates and Aristotle, Plato is one of the most important and foundational philosophers that we will be covering in this course. Some philosophers have gone so far as to say that all philosophy since Plato is merely a footnote to what he wrote. His writings cover a huge amount of material, from the concept of justice to knowledge, and from metaphysics to epistemology to ethics. This week I want to focus on 3 topics that come up in the reading: the role of the forms in Plato's philosophy, the analogy of the cave, and what Plato's ideal society looks like, and why he felt it necessary to come up with this ideal. First, let's pause a moment to talk about the forms. This may seem like an extremely abstract concept that doesn't play any role for us today. But before we rush past the forms, we should ask what problem it is that Plato was trying to solve by proposing their existence. And I think at the core of Plato's doctrine of the forms is an attempt to respond to sophistic relativism. The sophists had maintained that truth was impossible, and therefore that knowledge was impossible. If this was in fact the case, then what mattered was not an attempt to find the truth, or to find justice, but to find a way of getting your own way. The sophists were experts at convincing people of their arguments. Plato has just seen his friend and mentor killed at the hands of the Athenian courts, and by a jury that was persuaded by the rhetoric of the sophists. He is convinced that this kind of quote-unquote justice is inherently flawed. Socrates had challenged the sophists on a case-by-case basis, but had never come up with a positive theory as to how knowledge was in fact possible. If Plato was going to challenge the sophists, he had to go farther than his mentor and come up with a theory that guaranteed the possibility for an absolute, unchanging truth. Plato claims that knowledge is possible by separating reality into 2 realms, the realm of ordinary material objects and the realm of the forms. But this world is always changing and is open to individual interpretation. Everyone perceives the world slightly differently, and the world is always changing, which means that if reality is nothing but the world of becoming, then knowledge in an absolute sense is impossible. Plato agrees that there is a sense in which all of this is true, but he doesn't think this is the whole story. There is another aspect to reality, the realm of the forms. The forms are what make things what they are. Look at the picture on the screen. Each tree is slightly different, yet we without question lump them all together under a common name or type. We call this type tree. But how do we do this? How does our mind link all of these different objects together into one common type, or one common thing? According to Plato, each of these individual trees in some way participates in and resembles the form of tree. In the realm of forms, there is one perfect and one unchanging tree. All of the material, changing, and therefore imperfect trees we encounter are likenesses of this one common form. By proposing his theory of forms, Plato hopes to have guaranteed the possibility of truth, and therefore of knowledge. In the analogy of the cave, Plato tries to describe what he thinks the common human condition is. We are like slaves, chained in one place, unable to perceive reality for what it really is. We are deceived. He then asks us to imagine that somehow one of us escapes from our bondage and begins to see the world for what it really is. The process is painful. If your eyes have never seen real light, light from the sun, then the first encounter with bright sunlight will be both awesome and hurtful. We may turn away from the light at first, but the ones who are passionate about the truth will explore the real world despite the pain it causes them. What's more, the philosopher, for Plato, is someone who not only goes through the painful process of enlightenment, but feels responsible to return to those still in the cave and help them along in the process of enlightenment as well. Yet more often than not, Plato warns, the philosopher who returns will be met with scorn rather than with welcome. The slaves in the cave know no other reality than the shadows on the wall. People are both unwilling and unlikely to accept the truth that the philosopher brings them. And it is for this reason, Plato thinks, that most people in society are unopen to the wisdom of the philosophers. Some of you may have seen the movie The Matrix. I'm going to show a clip from The Matrix, which is in many ways a modern adaptation of the parable of the cave. Pay attention to the similarities between the cave and the Matrix as described by Morpheus.
At last. Welcome to you. As you no doubt have guessed, I am Morpheus. It's an honor to meet you. No. The honor is mine. Please, come, sit. I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. You could say that. I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up. Ironically, this is not far from the truth. Do you believe in fate, Neil?
No,
Why not?
because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there. Like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window, or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Finally, a few comments about Plato's ideal society. Plato has rejected tyranny as a viable option because he believes that it does not produce the right societal and cultural conditions for creating good people. But perhaps more surprisingly for us, he rejects democracy for the same reason. Plato thinks democracy is born out of greed and selfishness and ultimately leads to a society of decadence. According to Plato, he was unaware of any good states. All of the states he knows of are already flawed and unjust. He proposes a society wherein people are divided into three basic groups: workers, warriors, and guardians. For Plato, the guardians are best able to govern in society because they are people with a particular aptitude for and love of wisdom and justice. They are philosophers. Plato believes that if we were to choose among the young those who show a predisposition for philosophy and train them well in a variety of subjects, including ethics and religion, that they will be the most fit to govern society. His basic idea is that the average person is simply incapable of making good decisions for themselves, let alone for society. For Plato, there is nothing wrong with a good worker. In fact, a good worker is to be celebrated as a vital and necessary part of a well-functioning society. But it would be a confusion, he thinks, to think that they are also someone capable of making decisions for others in their society. Even if you suppose that they are smart enough and capable enough, they simply don't have the time to learn all that one needs to learn in order to be a good governor. The same goes for warriors. Warriors do not share natural dispositions with workers, and neither do they with guardians. There is nothing wrong with being a warrior. In fact, society desperately needs them. But Plato thinks, once again, that we should not confuse them with decision makers. In contrast to this, however, there were and are those who think that philosophers are, perhaps, the worst of all people to pick as rulers of the state. For instance, in another of Plato's books, entitled The Gorgias, one of his characters, a friend named Callicles, says that this is the truth then, and you will realize it if you will now abandon philosophy and rise to greater things. For philosophy, you know, Socrates, is a pretty thing if you engage in it moderately in your youth. But if you continue in it longer than you should, it is the ruin of any man. For if a man is exceptionally gifted, and yet pursues philosophy far on in life, he must prove entirely unacquainted with all the accomplishments requisite for a gentleman and a man of distinction. Such men know nothing of the laws in their cities, or of the language they should use in their business associations, both public and private, with other men, or of human pleasures and appetites, and in a word, they are completely without experience of men's characters. And so when they enter upon any activity, public or private, they appear ridiculous, just as public men, I suppose, appear ridiculous when they take part in your discussions and arguments. And in the Republic, a character named Adimantus says, "I say this with reference to the present case, for in this instance one might say that he is unable in words to contend against you at each question, but that when it comes to facts, he sees that of those who turn to philosophy, not merely touching upon it to complete their education and dropping it while still young, but lingering too long in the study of it, the majority become cranks, not to say rascals, and those accounted the finest spirits among them are still rendered useless to society by the pursuit which you commend." In both cases, Socrates' friends seem to think that philosophy is a nice thing for young people to enjoy, but not something people should continue to take seriously as they grow older. Finally, here are a few discussion questions for the week. What makes things what they are? That is, how do we know that things are what they are? And do you agree that we must respond to the sophists? If so, how would you? Do you agree with Plato in his assessment of the average person? And if you do, what does this mean for democracy? And finally, do you agree with Plato or his detractors about the right age to do philosophy? That is, if you should do it when you're young, or as Plato thinks, actually do it when you're old and after you've had life experience. Thanks, this has been a fun week for me, and if you're curious, the Cardinals are winning.